as in, about that. So welcome everybody to this month's Uncomfortable Conversations. Seeing some new faces, so welcome, especially if you're with us for the first time, and if you're not, welcome back. This series is an initiative of a few members of the Baha'i communities on the main line. It has its roots in a series of library meetings that we called Important Conversations, which is now in its 6th year and which deals with many different topics of importance to the community. But with the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, we felt that there was a need to have a dedicated conversation with focus on the issue of race in this country, to hold honest and truthful discourse about current conditions and their causes, and understanding the deeply entrenched notions of racism that pervade our society. We felt that we must build the capacity to truly hear and acknowledge the voices of those who have directly suffered from the effects of racism. It's an explicit goal of the Baha'i faith to establish unity among people of all races and backgrounds. And our intention is for this series to be a part of our contribution to that goal. And before I turn it over to Shirley, Sohail, I think you have a couple of things you needed to bring up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to welcome everyone as Doug did, but I'll remind you that these are monthly meetings every first Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock. We have these meetings. And if you like to get invitations directly from the organizers, you please put your email in the chat box and we make sure you're added to the email list. Thank you.
Hello and welcome everyone. And I'd like to welcome Kevin back again. It's always good to have him.
Thank you.
Yes. Now, Kevin D. Stroman Sr. is the president and founder of Mainline Mentoring, formerly Kid First Now, which is based out of Wayne. Kevin was born in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, and grew up in Mount Pleasant, an African-American community in Wayne. Kids First Now was formed in 1994 after Kevin saw a need for an organization to be established to help the children in his community. Mainline Mentoring's tutoring program has been helping children kindergarten through 8th grade with reading, writing, math, homework, computer skills, cultural and social activities. Kevin has been honored by his work over the years by organizers such as Philadelphia Baptist Association, Mainline Martin Luther King Association, the Kennett High School Diversity Awareness Organization, St. John's AME Church, and the Mainline NAACP. He also received recognition from the state of Pennsylvania for community involvement and leadership roles. So again, welcome, Kevin, and welcome to your young people. I'm very anxious to hear what they have to say tonight.
Is that my cue?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening, and thank you, Shirley, for reading that. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, it is a great time right now to really try to work with young people. There's no doubt that's been in my blood for a long time, and I'm not even going to talk about me because it's not about me tonight. It's about these 3 young men, and 2 of them I've actually tutored since they was small, and now they're all grown. And Umar, he's been coming and helping, assisting with us as well. But the main thing is that our young people are our future, and there's a lot going on that I'm sure they have, thoughts about, questions about, and even comments about. I was actually at Villanova earlier today speaking to some of their students. And we'll talk about that, about possibly doing something with them in the future. But anyway, like I said, Rehobi, I've known since a midget. Very young man. That's my young militant right there. So it's going to be interesting to hear him. It's going to be interesting to hear Yoni and his perspective, because those two are brothers. And the third one, Manasseh, he kind of keeps them all in check. So this is going to be great. And Umar, I just met, and he's a very nice young man, and he's very interested in a whole lot of things. So without further ado, I just want to introduce everyone to these three young men that are, they have a great future ahead of them. They're very smart young men, very engaging, and very community oriented. So it's going to be nice to hear what they have to say, because we have our conversations. Now it's time for me to sit back. So I don't know which one of y'all want to go first. Rehobi?
Go
Oh,
first.
Umar, you
Yeah.
unmuted. Hit it.
I'll go after Umar as well.
And leave the militant for last.
Oh, okay, so are you guys able to see this screen?
Yes.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I guess I'll start. Hey, everybody. So I'm Umar, and for this conversation, I'm coming in with the perspective as a Muslim American. And it's interesting because over the years, over 17 years I've lived, I've witnessed a lot of down, I've witnessed a lot of good, but overall there's been an upward trend and there's still progress to be made. So today I just want to talk about some of the events that influenced my growth and maybe some.
You just muted yourself.
Oh, sorry about that. So I'll start over. So hey everybody, so I'm Umar, and just for the uncomfortable conversation, I'm bringing that perspective as a Muslim American, and talking about the good and the bad that I've experienced over the 17 years. So a little bit about me. I'm a 17-year-old male born in New York City, and currently I'm attending Conestoga High School. I'm a Muslim American, and my parents immigrated here from Pakistan in the 1980s. And the reason why I say that is because I believe a lot of my virtues and interests really stem from that Pakistani culture that my parents instilled in me at a very young age. And like I said before, I have a lot of different experiences. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. And today I just want to share some of those with you. Before I was born, there was a preconceived.
Excuse me, Umar.
Yep.
Can you please speak up or turn your volume up?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you're having my problem.
Uh-oh. Okay. I'll move this a little bit closer. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. So before I was born, there was this I was born in 2004 and, 9/11 happened in 2001. So there was this preconceived notions or expectations that were already placed upon me before I was born. And a lot of that really stemmed from the fact that the terrorists who committed 9/11 were Muslim or claimed to be. And so one of the problems was because my parents were both Muslim at the time as well, we were hearing stories. I heard stories from a very young age, my parents going through, a lot of not so nice things. So my mom was forced to take off her hijab one time at the supermarket. Someone imposed on her, someone told her to take off her hijab, which is a cloth covering surrounding your head. And for my mom, that was a really big deal because her hijab was part of her identity. So asking her to take away that part of her identity from her was, such a riveting experience. My dad one time was flying to a business trip and he got interrogated by the TSA. And for my dad, that was a really big deal because number one, he was scared and frightened that he wouldn't see his family members ever again. And number two, he was hurt as well that people would, maybe choose him out or single him out of a crowd. And my parents' stories, they told me these stories when I was a little bit older, when I was 10 or 12 years old, because they didn't want me to grow up in this environment where I'd be, scared or fearful of these different, these maybe racist tendencies. But now that I look back, I have been brought up in that environment, right? As much as I like it or I don't like it, I have been brought up with a set of expectations and prejudices that I've faced. So in my youth, I went to an ISGVS mosque. The mosque is in Devon, and I used to go every Sunday. And even at a really young age, I went when I was maybe in elementary school. And we would talk about, terrorism and these really uncomfortable questions that the volunteers there didn't really know how to answer. We would be told these things when we were really young, and we would ask these volunteers at the mosque, how, what terrorism means and what it means to be a Muslim. And at the time, those were really difficult questions to answer. But even then, at a really young age, we were having conversations like we're having today, right? And having conversations is such an important part. I'll get into this later, but the fact that I was able to express concerns and talk about these ideas with other people really helped me develop as a person. So moving on into elementary school, I went to Wintcote Elementary School, which is it's in right next to Philadelphia. It's in I think it's in Elkins Park actually. But elementary school is great because I was developing myself as a person. And when you're a child, you have literally no prejudices for you or against you from the children's perspective. So kids don't really look at you from a racial perspective and try to judge you unless their parents are talking about something. But for the most part, I lived in a very tolerant elementary school society, and it was a really nice experience. I had a really diverse friend group. Moving on into middle school, we had a lot of social studies classes that discussed 9/11. And here's where the prejudices and thoughts started to form. I remember in 6th grade, our social studies teacher gave a 9/11 presentation, and her last slide said that, not all Muslims are terrorists. And because that slide was in bold, that idea that she was trying her best to try to dispel the stereotype. But, it did raise questions against me. People asked me, the connection, like, why would people think that Muslims were terrorists? And it would be tough for me to explain. One of the best things, though, was every other Friday, again, having those conversations, all the students in my middle school came together and we discussed for 15 minutes at the beginning of the school day, and we discussed about our identity and how we contributed to that identity. And again, having those conversations at a really young age really helped me establish my identity and learn more about it. A critical point for me was in 8th grade when Donald Trump was a presidential candidate. Regardless of the political aspects, Donald Trump did say things that can be perceived as Islamophobic. And one of the things he said was, in different points in his candidacy, he said, I think Islam hates us. He said he was looking at a lot of things to kick Muslims out of this country. And the reason why that was so important was because for the first time, I saw this sense of vulnerability in my parents, a sense of fear, because they really didn't know what was going to happen. It wasn't the concept of them getting kicked out of the country. It was the concept of, Donald Trump getting elected and, maybe people gaining confidence. And, because the president's saying certain things, the common man can say it too. That was the fear. But, even with all this fear and this uncertainty, there was a silver lining. During that time, I became much more knowledgeable of the political process. It was the first time I read the Constitution. I read what it meant to be an American citizen. I learned about my First Amendment right of free speech. I learned about the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, the idea that no matter what race you are, no matter what your orientation or gender is, you're protected if you're an American citizen. And I was born in America. So November 8th, that election day when Donald Trump actually gets elected, a lot of us were joking the night before, he's not going to win. Even my parents were very doubtful. And when he did win, there was, this hushed silence in my school and in my family on that day. Even teachers didn't really know how to respond. And what we really needed there, we stayed quiet, but what we really needed was an avenue to express ourselves, to have conversations, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum. It's so important to learn about the other side, right? And learn and speak about emotions, especially during such a tough time. So we really needed those conversations that we were having in elementary and middle school and early middle school. So moving on to another critical period, 2020 and the coronavirus. This was a time where, starting in March of 2020, I had a lot of time to myself, and I had a lot of time for self-reflection and establishing my identity even further. And one of the things I noticed was, there was a lot of anti-Asian racism and xenophobia. And this was interesting because, started to realize at that time, and this was an idea that was forming for so many years, that prejudice, no matter who it's against, is wrong, right? And that idea that sometimes when there's fear within us, and there's this fear and hatred and uncertainty, we look for a target. And because the coronavirus was such an unknown, and we didn't know, and people were dying, and no one had a cure at the time, even the president really didn't know how to control it. People looked at Asian Americans, and there was a target placed on them, and there was a little bit of an attack, right? And one of the main problems in our country, I feel like, is this sense of division, this lack of conversation. And if people were able to talk it out, right, instead of resorting directly to violence, if people were able to discuss and have conversations, that might have really changed the outcome of that racism and anti-Asian hate. There's also this idea of these mental health issues that festered within people because they were so isolated for a long time. And that was one of the things I was noticing even within my own family was, people were so isolated, they didn't know what to do. And they were having, you had a lot of stress and anxiety, and you didn't know what was going to happen. So we really needed an avenue for conversation once again, an avenue to talk. And both my parents were frontline workers at the time. And again, there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know whether my parents would get the coronavirus or whether my parents, would be in quarantine. So as the oldest sibling in my household, I had to be a little bit of a leader, right? And keep my siblings under control. And that was an interesting experience for me as well. During this time, to cope with all the stress, I actually developed a stronger connection to Islam as well. I prayed a lot more, I fasted, and I developed as a human being. And my point out of that is, no matter if it's religion, right, or a TV show or an interest, it's nice to have an anchor in life during times of such uncertainty. And it's nice to build off that anchor and develop yourself and hold on to it when you need it. There were more national events that were happening during this time period. Obviously, George Floyd was such a pivotal moment in American society. It was also a disappointing one because for me, it wasn't a question of race, it was a question of life or death, right? And for me, it didn't make sense to, support or just the fact that it was a murder. It didn't matter, even though, race was involved, but the idea that it was just a life or death murder and people were supporting, this police officer in Derek Chauvin, it was really disappointing for me to see. Again, the Atlanta spa shootings made me ask myself what it meant to be an American. And one of the best events that happened during this time, or one of the best avenues for me to express some of these questions, was my AP US government class, where we had discussions. And again, having those discussions really allowed me to express myself and express my emotions and, establish connections. The Capitol riots were another interesting question for me to ask myself. And I was always asking myself whether, if the riots were conducted by African Americans or Asian Americans or Muslim Americans, would authorities be as nice or as lenient? And that's a question that has always lingered with me. So for me, looking at all these events and looking at how to improve myself and to grow and to learn off of other people, I've joined a lot of organizations in my school. Costa Tide is an interdistrict organization where students from each school, each high school, come together from different races, identities, backgrounds, and orientations, and they come together and they have discussions like I am having today. And we talk about our identity and how we can learn from other people. I also joined the African American Student Union, just to get involved, to improve myself, to learn from another culture. I'm actually also part of the Muslim Student Association. And one of the problems we have, one of our main concerns, is that non-Muslims are not joining the Muslim Student Association. As Muslims, we want to share our message. We want to tell people, we want to expose other people to our culture and have fun with other people as well. We want everyone to join. And, I figured the same was for the AASU. That's why I joined. SOAR is Students Speaking Out Against Racism, a very similar organization dedicated to promoting social work and social justice, and the Equity Leadership Alliance falling under those same lines. I took a social work course taught by online over COVID-19, and it taught, some of those same ideals about establishing a family, right? The quote unquote family with everyone around you, being kind to everyone, all these simple things that we forget sometimes in our everyday life. I've also become much more involved in national news topics, and I'm much more willing to inform others and learn about other people's backgrounds and identities, and etc. And then once again, telling my story like I am today and helping other people tell theirs. Yeah, so I guess just to end it off, for me, I've always resonated with the fact that Islam at its core means peace. And for me, peace means a lot of things. And at a certain time, peace meant no war, like having no wars with other countries. Now we're looking within a country and we're asking ourselves, is there peace within a country? And I really think that there's work to be done to establish that peace, right? Our identity makes us strong, and we should really strive to find similarities. And even if we have differences, we should look at those differences as strengths, not as weaknesses. And if we believe that we can come together and have conversations and develop as human beings, we can definitely do it. So yeah, thank you for listening. And that's it for me.
All right, I'll share my screen now. I think, yeah, there we go. All right.
Yep, we see it.
Perfect. Can you see like the camera or like the you know what, I might just do.
We see
The
a
cloud.
slide.
It's good now. It's good
Yeah.
now.
We see it.
Okay. All right, perfect. All right. Hello everyone. My name is Yoni. So I guess, from what I was, told and informed about having this meeting, the uncomfortable conversations, is that it being an issue of race in our country, and which is very serious, but at times can be, very uncomfortable to talk about. There's so many questions as to why it's a problem we still have. How should we go about discussing this matter, or how should we fix it? Though all these questions are legitimate, they will distract us from the obvious answer. That answer being to have those negatively affected by others' outlook on race share and convey their experiences. And by doing that, we can then address the questions and come to a solution. So I would like to just give a little bit about me before we start. I don't think it'd make any sense for me to share personal experiences and a topic like this without you guys even knowing, without you knowing much about me other than my first name. So my full name is Yonatan Tashoma. Like I said about a minute ago, I go by Yoni. I'm 18. I live in Wayne. I'm a freshman at Delaware County Community College. Through kindergarten and 12th grade, I went to T District. And I mean, as you can tell, I am Black, I'm African American. My specific ethnicity, or my ethnicity is Ethiopian. So what I want to speak about today, and the topic of the issue of race is my identity, and me putting that my race as my identity. And many times I think to myself, who am I? Whether my identity is me being a brother, a son, a family member, a friend, student, coworker, there will always be at least one constant factor in my identity, and that is me being Black. But even placing my identity in the fact that I am Black has still left me confused. Not just because knowing I'm Black doesn't mean I know who I am, but because of how people respond to me being the Black kid as I was growing up. So you read these questions, I'm not Black, I sound white, and you wonder, what is he talking about? For you to understand what I mean, you're just gonna have to listen. Growing up in a wealthy, white, prominent area and going to a white dominated school has left me with some unforgettable moments. I don't want to make this about how just white people are the problem, because they're not. But most of my experiences with race has issued, or most of my experiences with race as an issue has stemmed from white people. If I look back to my middle school days, they're full of great memories with my friends and my classmates and moments I will forever cherish. But in between those moments, there have been times of questioning who I really am. I recall a moment in 6th grade, but I don't remember exactly when in that year it was. For anyone who's curious about what year this was, it was 2014-15 at Valley Forge Middle School. I was in class, most of, if not all of the other students being white. I don't remember exactly how this question was posed, but we were asked, what race are we? I answer, I'm Black. And then as soon as I say that, there is a white kid behind me and he says, you're not Black, you're white. And I say, what? I'm white, as I point to my skin. And he says, yeah, you don't act Black and you sound white. And I'm left there with everybody else laughing and having the only other option to laugh along with them, or else I seem like I'm easily offended. And I sat there speechless. I didn't know how to respond. And I later thought to myself, what does he mean I'm not Black? What does he mean I sound white? And so I would like to just, I will show a short clip. It's from the famous sitcom, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I would just first like to just speak a little more on this. So for many years, I asked the same questions as I dealt with the same kind of statements as the first kid in middle school. I would have never guessed you were Black by your voice. You act different than all the other Black kids, have been statements I've been more than accustomed to. There have been times that people have called me or have had made names like Oreo, the whitest Black kid I know, or Carlton. Carlton being the character in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And you will, if you haven't watched it before, you don't know the character, you will, I guess, find out in a short amount of time of why I was, I guess, called Carlton. And surprisingly, the people calling me these names were my supposed school friends. This is not to say I was truly offended by these names. At times, I would find them amusing. But was I laughing because everybody else around me was laughing? Was I laughing because I didn't want to seem like I was easily offended? I was laughing because, I didn't want to seem easily offended? I still ask myself these questions, and keep in mind, these comments mostly came from white people. And it's not surprising considering most of the TE district is a majority of white kids. And now I would like to show the short clip from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Make sure you share computer sound.
What happened?
Make sure you share computer sound. There's a little box before you click the share thing. There's a little box on the lower left that says optimize video and share computer sound. There are two boxes you need to check. Yes.
Optimize for a video clip.
Yeah, and then share computer sound. There are two boxes. Just check them before you share your content. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Yo, homie.
Can you hear that?
Yes. Yes. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm not supposed to say anything, but you have nothing to worry about. You're in. Your word? Me and Carlton got in? Well, not exactly. I mean, you're cool and all, but Carlton, well, he's not exactly our type. What do you mean, not our type? Well, Carlton is not like you and me. You know what I'm saying? No, I don't know what you're saying. Will, Carlton doesn't exactly exemplify what I think a Phi Beta Gamma is. Oh, and what is that? Well, it's not Ralph Lauren shirts and wingtip shoes in corporate America. We don't need a brother like him in this fraternity. Man, he is exactly what you need in this fraternity. I mean, Carlton has been a straight A student since preschool. He gives you 150% every time. Look, Will, I realize he's your cousin and you have to defend him, but this discussion is closed. All right. Come. Carlton. Come on, man. Let's go. I didn't get in.
What? Why?
Look, I don't know, man. Come on, just let's go.
How dare you not take Will? He's full of potential.
That's why we want him. It's you we don't want.
Me? But I did everything. I cooked, I cleaned, I hand washed the toilets.
Everything your butler does for you. I'm not accepting no prep school, Bel Air bred sellout into my fraternity. Yo, homie, you can stop all
No,
that.
wait, Will. I got this one. You think I'm a sellout. Why? Because I live in a big house or I dress a certain way? Or maybe it's because I like Barry Manilow.
He been Barry White, y'all.
Being black isn't what I'm trying to be, it's what I am. I'm running the same race and jumping the same hurdles you are, so why are you tripping me up? You said we need to stick together, but you don't even know what that means. If you ask me, you're the real sellout.
Yeah, that's right, boy. And in the words of my illustrious cousin, we gonna make like a tree and leave.
Look, you don't speak for the rest of us, dog. I'm gonna have you kicked out of here. Make like a tree and leave. I never say that. It's make like a banana and split.
I'll keep that in mind, all right?
So, all right, can you still hear me now?
Yeah, we
Yes,
got
you're
you.
fine.
Okay. All right. I should, all right. And you can still, and you can see the screen as well and see me.
No, we can still see Carlton's picture and the Oreo cookies.
Okay. Perfect. So, you know, when you see this clip, you know, obviously there is like the humor behind it and everything. But there's, you know, that very serious element. The fact that, or what Carlton said in his words, being black isn't what I'm trying to be, it's what I am. And, you know, obviously this discourse was between one black guy to another. But this is also very true in terms of, you know, what happened with me. And Carlton said himself, I'm running the same race and jumping the same hurdles. And even though just because you think I sound white, you think I don't act black, which I'll get into later about, or a little later as to what that means. But just because you think that doesn't mean I'll be treated like that by anybody else. You know, I could be like anybody else wearing like a hoodie, you know, hood on, walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden, you know, a cop thinks I look suspicious or that I fit the description of someone that they've been looking for, and then puts me down, you know, asks me to do something, or for some way or some reason there's some type of retaliation from me, and then I end up having to deal with a physical encounter, and there'd be just excess amount of force upon me, and then leading to some type of situation where only one person comes out of it, and I could just be another statistic. Because I sound white or I don't act black doesn't mean anybody else in the world is going to know that. They see me by my skin. So to make that kind of statement and to have to grow up with that was very confusing. But this is just one part of understanding the narratives of sounding or acting white or black. So I would like to, before I get into the narratives of, or what I like to say is the narratives of being white or black, white or black / people of color, I want to show this video that I think I was trying to find the words to articulate what I meant by the narratives. And this video, made in 2018, was like summed it up perfectly. I don't think anybody else could have, or any video or anything I said could have summed it up as well. So this video was very, very informational and very helpful.
Put your mic on for the video.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Can you tell what race I am just by hearing my voice? Correct. Turns out Americans are pretty good at guessing your race just by hearing your voice. It's called linguistic profiling and we all do it. There are certain auditory cues that give us subtle hints about who we're talking to. A lot of Black Americans speak what's referred to as AAVE, or African American Vernacular English.
AAV is non-rhotic, meaning that, like a British accent, there are no R sounds at the end of words or at the end of syllables.
John Fleming is a speech and dialect coach for movies and video games.
Generally speaking, there's the TH sounds, the th, and the get replaced with something, generally a T or a D. There's a few other vowels and things, but it kind of keeps going, and it gets kind of into the weeds a bit.
When it comes to being on the phone, though, Black people will often try to sound more white.
Yes, Mr. Ribbon, I would love to have the opportunity to sit with you to discuss some of our products.
It's a form of code switching, or in this case, alternating between two different dialects.
Did you try to grab me by my collar, right? That's when good morning, customer service. My name is Philip.
Black people talking white is having a real moment in media right now. Sorry to Bother You is a movie about a black salesman whose career only takes off when he starts talking white.
You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
Hey, Mr. Kramer, this is Langston from Regal View.
And Black Klansman is a movie about a black detective who infiltrates the KKK by pretending to be white over the phone.
God bless white America.
The idea is to speak in what's called the standard accent.
The standard accent is the one spoken by the majority group or the socially advantaged group.
Olivia Kang is a psychologist at Harvard. She's working on a project that explores the hidden biases we hold.
If you speak with the standard accent, you're judged as being more intelligent, more competent, more credible, more hireable. Now having a regional accent or a non-standard accent, now you're not getting those advantages. You're seen as less credible or less hireable.
These biases are implicit. This isn't Charlottesville tiki torch racism. It's much more discreet than that.
The most basic way of understanding implicit bias is by thinking about the associations we make. If two things occur together over and over again in our experience, we link them together.
Salt and pepper, day and night, bread and butter, these types of associations are helpful, but there are some that aren't. Now, if I say the word genius, you're probably thinking of some collector's edition white dude. Now, if I say the word criminal,
voices aren't just sounds. In a lot of ways, they're auditory faces. So when you hear a voice, you can, in some sense, piece together what the person on the other end of the phone can look like. Roughly how old they are, their gender, where they come from. But the interesting thing is that you can also form impressions about character. So how intelligent someone is, how competent, how likable, how trustworthy. And these impressions can be flawed, right? A lot of these things might have a basis in your implicit biases or things that you've heard, portrayals you've seen on television. And so when people are doing something like conducting a voice interview, often the implicit biases they have about voice can influence the decisions that they're making.
Every Black American is bilingual. We speak street vernacular and we speak job interview.
in order to combat some of these implicit biases, Black people, myself included, try to sound as white as possible. I sound like Bill Gates impersonating your mailman. Why hello there? I'm wondering if there are any positions available. Oh no, I don't mind waiting. But does changing your voice actually work? A study in 2001 found that landlords would make racist snap judgments to callers with certain dialects. Compared with whites, Blacks were less likely to get callbacks, less likely to be told there was an apartment available, and more likely to get their credit questioned. However, blacks who code switched fared better than those who didn't. Code switching helps in other areas too.
And actually, Don Lemon is a very good example, because to become this main host that he is, he's talked about how he had to change, because he's from New Orleans, and he consciously had to change his accent for the sake of moving up at CNN.
The President of the United States is racist.
Instead of changing the way we speak, maybe we should change the way we listen. I might be able to tell your race from your voice, but that doesn't tell me anything about your character. There's tons of black mailmen.
Too many.
So, as I was saying, the that video was very, very helpful in coming to terms and being able to understand a little better, not just for anybody else, but for me, as to what people mean when they say you sound white, and those kind of sensitive statements. So as I was saying, or the word that came up a bit was the word vernacular, which is by definition the language or dialect spoken by the ordinary people in a particular country or region. And so, as you can see, there's 3 points here: vernacular, appearance, act. And these are the 3 big components, major components, that make up the narrative and the way people see a white person or a black person / person of color. And as we see here, it says positive connotations and negative connotations. So the idea that there is a good or proper manner from white people in these 3 components, but sometimes or a lot of times the way people see it for black people, people of color, their vernacular, their appearance, their act can be connotated in a negative way, and that it's not, it doesn't check off the marks in each of those categories. So I wanted to highlight what psychologist Olivia Kang said. The standard accent is the one spoken by the majority group or the socially advantaged group, said Kang. When someone hears a standard accent, that then causes an implicit bias to the attitudes toward people or associate stereotypes with them without our conscious knowledge. I couldn't tell you how many times I've been told by adults, "Oh, you're so well spoken." At the time, it felt like a compliment, but now I think to myself, they might have thought I wasn't as intelligent as the others around me, or at all. As you may know or have seen people deal with this, appearance also plays a huge role. I remember all throughout grade school, and even now, my mother gets on me about how I look, my attire, and the clothing I wear. Nothing can have holes. There needs to be some type of color coordination. Everything must be ironed, and my hair must be combed or picked out. I used to have a lot bigger hair, so at that time I'd have to pick it out instead of now combing it. She didn't want me giving anyone the chance of thinking that I'm poor or raggedy or careless. By raggedy, there's different terms for it, but by the term raggedy, I mean like filthy or dirty. I used to ask my mom why I would see other kids not dressing the same. And when I said other kids, as soon as I said that, even she knew I was talking about white kids. And she told me that they don't care, or no one cares if white kids aren't dressed or present themselves nice. They're already known as decent and well-mannered, which takes me to the next point. Growing up, my manners and act have always had to be second to none. I've always had to be at my best and on my best. My parents would not stand any nonsense going into stores or out into public. I never thought much of it or that it had to do with the way I look. But being singled out in stores, school, or events started to open my eyes. I still remember a very vivid moment in middle school. Everyone was running down the hallway and trying to get to recess. I was in a group with kids, me being located in the middle of the bunch. As we make the last turn down the hallway to get there, we were stopped by a teacher. The teacher being a white female. Most of the kids kept running, but three or four of others, including me, stopped running. With a very annoyed tone, she says, "Only the gray sweatshirt kid," which was me and one other kid behind me. I point at me and then him, trying to differentiate and trying to pick out which one of us she was referring to. And she looks at me and says, "Yeah, you." And she responds with a more annoyance in her tone. The other kids run away, and then there's just me and the teacher. She walks over and goes on about how I'm endangering other students and how do I ever expect to go to high school and I keep running in the hallways. I asked her why she singled me out, why I'm the one she picked out of everybody. And she says because she saw me first. But how is it that in that case, she's just waiting for the kids to run around the corner and many pass by her, but I'm the one she picks from? I'm not believing her at the moment. And then I ask her, is it because I'm Black? And at the time, I don't realize that such a question, and posing that question can, be very, very, very detrimental to someone's character, someone's reputation. And saying that can really affect somebody, or how people view them. And I, at the time, didn't know. It was an innocent question, rather than someone making a joke or trying to get someone annoyed by saying, "Oh, is it because of my race?" And I was running with a group full of white kids, which made me ask that question. If I knew I had other Black kids next to me, or if I knew that it wasn't all white kids or very few white kids in that group, I wouldn't have dropped the question. I wouldn't have asked for that. And not one of them stopped either. And she looked shocked and then offended. And she gets more annoyed and even threatens to send me to the office. She lets me go, but not after she gets my name. For what reason, I don't know. Because I was never addressed to the office. I was never called in for it. And as I go outside, I realize now why my parents made sure I behaved properly at all times. As a Black kid, running around or misbehaving or doing something that's problematic or endangering, or quote unquote endangering, as the teacher had said, endangering somebody, automatically makes me or another kid of color troublemaker. And sadly, this is just one of the encounters out of many that I've experienced. So vernacular, appearance, and act are the major components of the comparison of narratives between white and Black or people of color. And so, obviously it's in our nature, and being a moral people, having morals, to ask, how can I change this? Or, what can I do to make this not happen? Which is, very, very valid question, and a question I hope everybody asks themselves. You hear all this and wonder, what can I do? How can I help? What I have to say is keep your eyes and ears peeled. There are encounters like I've experienced happening every single day. And luckily in this generation, we have technology that we utilize in these situations. And I've seen many times people recording encounters, not just encounters that of racism, but like just anything. But in this situation, recording because of that, and bringing the attention of millions of people around the country and around the world to see this and see what's happening. But that's one recording or a couple of thousand recordings aren't gonna help people realize and bring attention to this. We need to, whenever we see something, we need to stand up. And for someone who might not be able to speak for themselves, or who might not be able to stand up for themselves. And even if they can stand up for themselves, even if they have that ability to stand up for themselves, we need to stand with them. We need to be united as the human race, but being able to acknowledge our diversity and embrace it. When encountering people of color, don't just ignore the implicit bias. Don't ignore that that subconscious, or that later on when you realize it, don't ignore that subconscious voice saying or giving you that stereotype or prejudice if you do. Instead, hear it and be able to deconstruct it, be able to piece it apart and look at it and say, why am I thinking this way? Is there something that's caused me to have this perception, that's caused me to think this way? And there's so much more that you can do that I wouldn't be able to mention if I maybe had an hour or a couple hours to even speak about this. There's so many things we can do, and we can break down bit by bit and elaborate on. But what's important though is that we're treating everyone equally, and we're treating everyone the way we want to be treated. That's common knowledge, and I hope so, and I would like to say that it is common knowledge. You don't need someone to tell you in a brief presentation that we should be treating each other equally, because we all are the same at the end of the day. We all bleed the same, and like I said, our race is the part of diversity that we need to embrace. But we all bleed the same. At one point or another, we're all going to be under the same ground once we're dead. So there's no point, and there should never, even if that wasn't the case, you should never have to treat someone that way, regardless of race. Thank you again for attending the meeting and listening in. Trying to figure out how to send this.
There's a red button. There's a red button. Oops.
Oh, I see it. Sorry.
Rahobi.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
Are you guys able to see it?
Yep, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
All right. Whoops. All right. Hello, my name is Rahobi, and I'm one of the speakers for today's meeting, which is Uncomfortable Conversations. So starting off, just say a little about me. Like I said, my name is Rahobi Tshoma. I'm 14 years old, and I'm a freshman attending Conestoga High School. I'd say that I'm an active person. I like to play sports, especially soccer and basketball. Also with school, I enjoy being in school clubs. But for me, probably my favorite that I've been in so far was African American Student Union. And in 7th grade, I was a student ambassador for the club, and I found it really fun because I was able to come up with meetings with 3 other people who are ambassador students, and it was just cool to learn more about Black culture and being able to present it. So for my presentation, I want to talk about growing up Black in the main line. And when Uncle Kevin asked me if I could be a speaker for this presentation, I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But once he explained to me what it was on about, uncomfortable conversations, I knew immediately what I wanted to speak about, which was, like I said, growing up Black in the main line. And specifically, probably the most vocal points I want to go over are racism coming here in the main line, and also, and just in the suburbs in general, and also understanding Black culture, like cultural understanding. So before I go into speaking, I'll just like show a clip of a video. Oops.
Make sure you share computer sound. You're not sharing computer sound, Roby. At the
Yeah.
lower left of the screen, there are two boxes. Make sure you check them.
I found that.
Many Black families moving.
You guys hear that?
Better now, yes.
Like many Black families, moving from the city to the burbs is a huge adjustment. And the transition can be very tough because the environments are so different.
We're talking about suburbs. One of the things that I think one of the biggest pieces is distinguishing, I guess, some of the stereotypes of what's associated with suburban. So, for example, a lot of time when you say urban, people think Black or they think inner city, where that's not. Urban just means urban population where there's transit, there's movement, there's key city centers, maybe your administrative offices of the city. So some of the struggles I think that young people have here in Oregon is that you can live in an urban area and still not have that sense of energy that's coming from other urban areas across the country because it is such a white space. So if you're in a suburban area, you're less connected than even those that are in that inner city community. And then here in Oregon, people are so dispersed at this point that there really is hard to find that one central cultural space that's more about culture than it is about having a concentration of Black people.
Where were they in Portland? What is the community? What does it look like? It was just the most homogenous place, and it really felt like not only was it homogenous for me, but that the whites were not used to interacting with African Americans. And so you have like this real naivete, ignorance, stereotypical understanding of Blacks, or just sort of not really understanding the nuances, and just the lack of ability to have frank, honest conversations.
Portland is the 5th whitest city in America, so diversity is not prevalent. Yes, you see people of color, and yes, they stand out. So I think that is absolutely reflected in our school systems, and it affects not just our students, but society in general.
Good, very good. So did you guys get these scored?
No, they're just stories to share. And we shared them with the second graders too.
I decided to go to my girls' school and talk to some of their teachers and their principal about diversity in their school system.
The whole issue of diversity and acceptance and understanding racism and hidden biases are all things that we need to continue to discuss and work with. And we have to sometimes step out of our comfort zone and address issues when they arise that might not be comfortable, but yet we have to say something, because if we don't start talking about these things, we can't affect the change that needs to happen in order to provide equity for everyone.
I know that when we look at data, that students who are of a minority race have a different experience in school than white children do. And being white, that's a little bit hard to see. So it's nice that we're kind of looking deeper and recognizing those areas where we need to make changes.
One of the things as far as being a teacher is that they want, at least when I look at applications and things when they're advertising for teachers, they want somebody that's culturally competent, I had an instructor who explained it as being culturally relevant, which I really preferred. I liked that because culture is always changing. So if you're competent, then that means that stops. Like, oh, I'm culturally competent now, I don't have to do anything else. But, to stay relevant means you always need to be learning.
I think we need to sit down as a staff in each school and talk about it. I think we need to have the time to say, okay, this is the time when we're all going to sit down and discuss diversity within our classrooms and to brainstorm ideas and to just talk about, well, what has worked well in your classroom? What have you learned? Who has taken classes? You know, bringing all this information in together and sharing it. So I think this is a huge project that the school should undertake so that we all have that experience that everyone else and all the knowledge, bring in all the knowledge that everyone has and share it.
As teachers, we want everybody to be happy and comfortable, and sometimes dealing with subjects that make people uncomfortable, we as a group tend to shy away from or avoid because we don't want conflict. We want calm and security, and we want our kids to feel secure. But in saying that, we might think that our kids are feeling secure, but maybe they're not because their needs aren't being addressed.
It's like you kind of feel different. You know, they let you know that you're different. No, it's not something so noticeable, but if you're Black, then you notice it.
I don't think it's a big impact. Like sitting in class and then you look around and you realize that you're the only one in class, then that's when you notice. But for me, not necessarily.
Like a lot of these girls, for me, I felt at times like I carried the whole Black race on my shoulders, especially when it came to lessons regarding culture or Black history in the classroom. It's a lot of pressure.
In elementary school, I was reading a book, I forgot which one, but the N-word came on, and my teacher was like, I was the only Black girl, and she was like, do you care if I mind it? Do you mind if I say it? And I was just like, well, no, but you shouldn't have to ask me that. Like, I feel like they don't put it out there enough, like, just kind of weird after that.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me. Like, we were reading a book, and there was only 2 Black kids in the classroom, so the teacher had to stop and talk about how it might be a different meaning if we didn't say the word or if we did. And so she was asking if like we felt offended if they said it or not, and like if the other kids could read the book out loud. And I just felt like I don't know, like the whole focus was on me and him.
Because this was in front of the whole class. She wasn't individual, like one-on-one asking you from everybody else.
Like, it draws more attention to the fact that you're different when they're like, is this okay with you? Like, they're trying to be politically correct, not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but at the same time, it's like, you're kind of being bubbled off. Like, is it okay with you? Do we have permission to say this word and continue on with the lesson?
So I like that clip because it really just showed how racism is still relevant, even being Black in the main line, and not only just in the main line, but in the suburbs in general, like for the girls in Oregon being in the suburbs. So now going on to when I first wanted to talk about racism in the main line. Before I say anything, I just wanted to define what the word means. And coming from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the word racism means a belief that a race is fundamentally determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority over a particular race. So pretty much just making this short, someone believing that their race is superior over others, and with that belief, this can cause discrimination, or someone who's racist and have that belief discriminate others, or the unjust treatment to others because of their race, gender, or sex. And for me, one experience I had where I felt as if I were being discriminated was back in middle school, and I had a substitute teacher, and we were doing individual work. And when we were done the class, when we were finishing our individual work, we would just we were talking to each other. And once I finished my work, I started talking to my friend sitting next to me, And once I started talking, she didn't call anyone out, but immediately she started yelling at me and brought a lot of attention about it and started getting mad at me. And I felt as if she was singling me out because she got mad at me for talking, even though everyone else was talking. And with this, like discriminations are caused by stereotypes because of ideas certain people have of other groups of people. And this is the perfect segue for my next topic on racism in the main line, which is stereotypes. And I'm going to say the definition again, coming from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. The word means a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. So with this, many people, not many people, many stereotypes about the Black community is that Black people are very loud or rude or disruptive. And I feel like with those stereotypes in mind, the substitute teacher thought as if like or felt as if I were fulfilling those stereotypes. And because of that, called me out and singled me out and discriminated me. And so in general, racism is a problem that stems out to many things like discrimination, which can be caused because of people's stereotypes of other groups of people. And for my second idea, my focal point is on cultural understanding. I think with this, there's not enough Black history and culture being taught in the schools. And this isn't just a problem here in the main line, but it's been a problem throughout the US for a long time. And I mean, with this district, the TE district, I think we've been doing really good adding more Black history into the school curriculum. And one example is from last year. I remember in my English class, we were going over the Little Rock Nine, specifically on Melba Beals. And you know, I've read about her before. I looked her up, and for most of the class though, no one really knew about her. And I was surprised because she was such a big she was very important in US history. And I think because of her being Black, wasn't really put into the school systems. And it wasn't like that for a while until now, you know, like the TE district adding more Black curriculum. And I think especially TE district has been really doing good with it. And they even got us to be in a meeting, a Zoom meeting with Melba Beals. And I thought it was really cool because I was able to hear her speak and talk about her experiences going to school at Little Rock and just integrating. But I mean, I found it really cool because we were getting in depth about it. And she's really just a big reason why I'm able to go to be able to go to an integrated school. And because of that, that's someone I look up to. But unfortunately, many schools across the US, it's not mandatory to teach Black history. So many kids don't learn about heroes in US history like Melba Beals. And also a lack of representation in the Black community is also a result in people not understanding Black culture because first of all, the Black community itself, we are not speaking up on things that we find unjust and perspectives about life just being Black. And it's because certain situations that we feel as is like unjust is normalized in society, and we don't feel like it's something that it's important or needs to be brought up. And because of that, people aren't able to see the other perspective of the Black community. But also it's the Black community, um, we aren't seeing ourselves in everyday things like in books and in movies. And especially for young children who are Black in the main line, and also in just in the suburbs, not being able to see people that look like you and things that you read, you watch, and things you do every day won't help with feeling like you're represented, and you're just not seeing anyone that looks like you. So having more diverse movies, films, and books may help with having representation in the Black community, which will lead to having more understanding in the Black community. So I hope with this conversation, you guys were able to understand my perspective on living and being Black in the main line. And with these conversations like this, we're able to progress as a people and become a better society. Thank you for listening.
Now you can stop sharing so that we see everyone. There's a red button, probably at the lower end of there you go. Thank you for all three. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Is that my turn?
It's everybody's turn, actually.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and say something.
Yes, please.
You three guys, I'm so proud of you. Each and every one of you, they were great presentations, and to hear your perspectives on so many different topics. And obviously, Yoni and Rehobi, y'all got a special place in my heart, man. You two kill me. You really do. But I am so proud. And I had a conversation a few days ago just talking about today's youth. And obviously, for some reason, my video is behind my sound. See, like right now I'm talking. There's my hand moving. But anyway, we were talking about where the youth would be at and whether or not the youth would actually be able to help make a change. And for me, because it does have a lot to do with where this country is going in terms of racism, and it's on the uprise, and I was hesitant on saying that, because the guy I was talking to was trying to say, oh yeah, I'm very, I'm positive about what's going to happen, and me, I'm not so sure, because, we're not going to get into the elections, but I know the elections that just happened, with, as far as I'm concerned, a racist backdrop, it's like, it's okay to be racist, but listening to you three, you've given me a different perspective. And I really, really, really thank each and every one of you for what you did tonight, for what you said tonight, and just sharing your true feelings. I was very proud of you guys, man. Very, very proud. And I'm gonna tell your dad he can give you back your games now. Y'all can go back to playing and having fun. Umar, great job, bro. And they even hear it from the Muslim side. You know what I mean? Because we all know racism is in many, many forms. And, unfortunately, a lot of times it is the Black that's at the forefront. But, there's racism in so many different ways and forms. And hopefully one day we'll get better. So I'll let anybody else ask questions. I'm getting out here. I just had to say that to my posse, man. Thank you guys, man. Thank you.
But don't leave, Kevin.
Oh, I'm not going nowhere. Even though my Sixers are on.
Yeah. you
We're up.
You can record it. Watch it later. Well, thank you very much. It was wonderful. Now, something that I was wondering, what is, I think it was Yanni talking about the nickname and stuff, Carlton. What is the attitude of non-Black population at school? In other words, of course, probably nicknames and stuff white students have nicknames for another white student also probably. But what I'm saying in general, what is the attitude? Are there, do you guys detect what you call it? I don't want to say racism because racism is such a prejudice. That's what I want to say. Do you still see prejudice among your peers? So unmute yourself.
Yeah. I understand that when you say that racism can be a very strong term, but honestly, I think it's the other way around, that there isn't prejudice, that they aren't thinking, oh, he's gonna do this or he's gonna do that because he's Black. Not there's no form of prejudice, but rather racist could be taken as racist remarks. And yes, I have had racist remarks, and you were asking the attitude of like Black students, like how we take it, like how we take those comments. Yeah, like I mentioned, and other occasions as well, it's uncomfortable. I mean, hence why it's uncomfortable conversations, and I'm bringing it up. It's hard to be like, hey, I don't find that funny, or I don't appreciate that, because when you're surrounded by everybody else who's for most part, almost, I've had a few classes throughout grade school where I've been around Black people, and it's one or other two in my class. But other than that, it's always a class full of white students. And to be able to say, I don't find that funny, or not really, it's hard to say that without seeming you're easily offended, because I don't take that personally. I try not to, even though I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, it's them not being sensitive, them being insensitive. So I mean, it's like like the nickname Carlton, him being or Oreo. I guess if someone doesn't understand that, like the Oreo being the outside, like the I don't want to say like the cracker part of it, because it's not a cracker, it's more like a cookie, the cookie part of it. That's like chocolate, and the inside being white, kind of it's the representation of what people see of me. I'm chocolate, I'm Black on the outside, and the inside I'm like the icing, I'm like vanilla, I'm white. And so, and also the whitest Black kid that I know, by that being I'm the closest someone, or I'm the closest out of the Black people they know to being white, but still being quote unquote Black. So it was very confusing to be like, am I Black? Am I actually Black, or however people want to put it? And I think Carlton put it to simple terms. I don't try to act Black. I don't try to be Black. I am Black. So yeah, that's my response to the kind of, and how I feel as though my attitude has been towards those remarks, and dealing with that throughout grade school.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me piggyback on what Yoni said. There's no doubt. I mean, that's one of my favorite clips. And yes, Carlton's a mess, you know what I mean? But some of this has kind of been taught to us as a people, as African Americans, from the times we came over on the slave ships. And that's a lot because of the slave masters had a tendency to make everybody fight each other, and make everybody literally go against each other. And that's been perpetrated in our community ever since. You know what I mean? There's always, like the light skin versus the dark skin, the speaking correctly versus not speaking correctly. And it's a basic, for me, once again, it's also a way to divide our communities, where we're always fighting amongst each other. Because if you see a lot of other communities, they kind of come together, and they kind of work together in terms of being a community, in terms of supporting a community, like Rehobi was saying, you know what I mean? What do we do, when we don't speak up? We see things happening and we don't speak up, You know what I mean? And I do know that you know, like for instance, Uncle Tom. A lot of people really don't know the history of Uncle Tom, you know, but that's been something that's been handed down over the years. And that part there has a lot to do with, like I said, being in the slave days, because you had, you know, as they called them back then, the house Negro, you know, who was in the house taking care of the family. So they had special privileges, while the people that were in the fields from sun up to sundown, you know, slaving hard, you know, bloody hands from picking cotton, on and on and on. And they weren't, you know, given the same privileges, you know, and so it's just been something that's been in our community. And that's something, I'll be honest, I still fight, and I'm glad to see that you even, you know, kind of grasp it. But I know even me, when I was going through school, I mean, a lot of people call me white boy. They call me, you know, because I, you know, but, you know, it's interesting that you even brought up the code switching, because it's true. You do have to talk two different ways, you know what I mean? And in order for you to get, you know, noticed and recognized, you know, sometimes you do, you know, I don't want to call it talking white, but I just talking, you know, you ain't in the hood, so you gotta just chill, you know. And it's funny. It's funny, but like I said, listening to you guys is even better. So I'll stop.
It's interesting that you did bring that up. There's actually now a study in college that, you know, I did a presentation last week on racial linguistics, and is how language shapes people's attitude about race. And that code switching in the dialogue is actually a book about how language shapes people's view on race. They mention how President Obama had to do the code switching. You know, he had to speak a certain way to get input and buy-in from the other leaders, you know, in Congress or whatever. What he could easily go into a neighborhood, which he did often. He would go into restaurants and eat, and he can switch his vernacular to being, you know, down, you know, like speaking so much like, you know, his culture, you know, to be able to do that code switching, because he knew quite well how language influenced people's view on race and some of the terminology. But what it was curious to me is, and you guys can correct me, you know, being a younger generation, I'm being kind of hopeful, because I'm thinking that, and I'm hoping that some of these things are dying out, that they're not being as prevalent in what's taking place. Because when I came up, I had the same thing. And it's amazing that they're still telling you, you sound white, you know, and it's okay. I mean, and a teacher in high school telling you what a college professor told me, because I had a 4.0 in all of my classes in my master's class, that I'm a credit to my race. And he thought that was a compliment. That was an insult. So in other words, because I'm Black, I'm not supposed to speak well, I'm not supposed to write well, I'm not supposed to get a 4.0. And I was hoping some of that had died down, and that the younger generation, that you guys are mixing more and you're identifying it more, and you're not going through as much as maybe myself or Kevin had to go through when we came up. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm looking for hope in your generation that is not as prevalent.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's coming to the point where it's not a comment that you hear very much. But the sad part of it is that it's not because they're more aware of it, in terms of like they don't want to offend you, or they don't want to, or not they don't want to offend you, but they're trying to make things better. But people are fearful now for cancel culture. They're very aware of it, and it's probably one of the most terrorizing things that we've seen, in terms of like spreading throughout the internet, and having your face posted somewhere, and then your whole reputation just destroyed and put to the ground because of something you said. So to see somebody say, oh, or let's say a white person to tell another Black person, or you sound white, and for someone to get footage of that, or for that to be spread around, that is, you know, very, very damaging to their reputation, to their potential of them still like keeping their job, and all those things. So I think now, sadly, it's more out of fear than it is out of trying to connect and have respect and trying to end that racism and end that that idea of the idea of like speaking a certain way or that vernacular. It's less of that and more just out of fear.
Mind if I chime in agreement with that? All right. Yeah. So I've kind of had some skull bashing conversations, if you will, with older white men at some of the churches, or one of the churches I attend around here. And yeah, there's no, to your point, Yoni, that there's no, hey, what can we do to fix this? And instead it's met with resistance at best. And there's no sense of taking ownership and accountability, as far as, you know what, we were wrong in how we, speaking for white people, were wrong as far as viewing non-white people, Blacks, Asians, Latinos, and so forth.
I think Mary wanted to bring up another subject. Please unmute yourself, Mary. Yes.
Yes, thank you. This is a real thrill, including to see Kevin. He and I worked together. I don't want to say how many, we had a lot more or different colored hair then. This is when I was at Cabrini on the main line. But I wanted to ask the three students, and I'll apologize, I missed the first one of you two, but I heard the brothers. And I wondered, you know, with this critical race theory out there in the news and pulling down crazy discussions at school board meetings, and from my point of view, really shutting down any conversation about race or racism or even basic facts about Black history. What do you guys, you students, have you heard any discussion about that, or what do you think about that whole discussion about critical race theory, if you've heard anything about it or you have thoughts? Because the adult generation is completely off the everything on this. So thank you in advance for your thoughts.
I don't want to take up the spotlight from Umar or Rahobi. If you guys have anything, or I'm more than willing to speak.
Go for it.
Yeah, I don't think there is or at least I haven't sat into any of the meetings. I have heard though from Uncle K that there is that critical race theory, and how that's not a discussion, or it's not much of a discussion. And I from what I hear and how I take it in, it's almost out of shame and out of just like almost trying to disregard it at this point, because they don't want to seem like they are, but in that way they are ignoring it, even though they're trying to ignore the fact that how do I put it? Oh yeah, they don't think that, or they don't want to think that it is a problem, because they don't want to seem racist, or they don't want to seem like they have that title around them. But by doing that, they allow it to continue. And so, I mean, like, I had this discussion with my younger brother and my dad when we were, my brother and I were kind of going over and making this presentation for this discussion. And the statement my brother had was that the history they teach us is whitewashed. And my dad was like, that's very strong. Like, you know, obviously, like, I'm not saying you're wrong, but be careful in the words you use. But as I started to look deeper and deeper, and I've obviously learning and going throughout the curriculum of the TE district and the history classes, he wasn't far off from what he said about it being whitewashed.
Total facts.
That it's not to say that some of the history that they taught us wasn't right, because it, you know, they taught us a decent amount of what was correct, but it wasn't that they weren't telling us, or it wasn't that they were saying something wrong. They weren't saying something at all. They were missing out a big part of the history, that by ignoring it, they allow things to continue, hopefully not, but you allow history to potentially repeat itself. And even not just in history classes, but also throughout experiences and encounters all throughout mostly middle school and just early high school, considering we had COVID and I didn't have the later part of my high school year to interact with other people, but middle school and my early years of high school, I think there definitely was a bit of negligence from the school in terms of cracking down on the racism or those remarks that are deemed as racist between students, and instead they just try to crack down on racism as a whole and not try to get into detail about what it's really like in between peers, in between students, and kind of just go over it, but don't really get into detail and elaborate. And that's what I take away from what Uncle K had told me, that this isn't something that they're taking care of, because they really aren't. All they're doing is bringing up the topic of racism and then not going over what it's really doing and how it's affecting the students. Because if there was anything of, such as that, I'm pretty sure I'd be aware of it. So yeah, I guess that's my take on it.
I think Rehobi wants to. Go ahead.
And so with what Yoni was saying about the schools being whitewashed, when I was talking about that, I'm not saying that the TE district and the schools are whitewashing it. It's history itself that was been whitewashed, and it's been taught throughout history like that. And that's why, and you're not being taught about that things like this are being whitewashed. So they're thinking, oh yeah, this is part of history. It's going to be like this. And because of that, everything keeps on going, being like that. So us having this conversation, speaking up about it, even though it's very it's something that uncomfortable conversation like what we're having right now, talking about that will help history itself, pretty much like what Yoni was saying, deconstruct it from being whitewashed.
I think Omar wants to make a comment. Please go ahead, Omar.
Oh yeah, if I can jump in,
Definitely.
The reason why people don't want to include such uncomfortable topics in history books is because they don't want to have those uncomfortable conversations, right? But the thing they don't realize is, as minorities, we've been having these uncomfortable conversations with our parents, with our peers, with other classmates. And the only way to grow is to talk about it, right? If we just shelter it off and we leave it off for future generations, it'll never change. And we can only affect change through conversation and through bringing it up. And the best way to do that is through education, right? So it really just starts from those, from the bottom base. Like, we need to attack that first to affect change.
And I think that's the reason why it's so controversial, right? So of course, what is being talked about as critical race theory has nothing to do with actual critical race theory, but it is people wanting to avoid learning about the history of race relations, because, I mean, like the teacher you were talking about, Yoni, I think, who stopped you, it's very difficult to confront the attitudes that you have and the situation that you're in, and admit that, oh, this is not what I would like it to be. And of course, even more difficult after that to actually try to do something to remedy it, to change your own attitudes, to change the system that you live in. And far too many people just want to not have it brought to their attention so that they can ignore it. They don't have to do any of that work. Sorry, I think I'm just complaining. Yeah.
Well, I think honestly, the people who benefit from the way it's been done, white people in general, don't want anything to change. They don't want anything but their own. Let's keep it. Let's get back to normal. and all the code words. So let's be civilized. Let's take it a step at a time. We have to reread Martin Luther King's letters from Birmingham jail over and over about the worst thing. Yeah, they're racist, but there's also these, he called out the white clergyman who just said, now let's just take it a step at a time. Let's not rush anything. They don't want change. They want everybody to forget about it. Anyway, Omar and Yoni and all of you, you're spot on. I'm just embarrassed for my generation.
I think Kevin raised his hand. Please go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, unless somebody has something, I have to chime in too, because the reality of it is, back in the 60s and 50s and below, we fought to make a change for equality. We fought to make a change to get things better in this country. Well, here it is in 2021, we're going backwards. And like Dr. Lewer just said, a lot of this has to do, and they're using the critical race theory as a platform to make sure that true history isn't taught. Like Rahobi had mentioned, and Yoni and even Umar, you can touch the surface on true history when it comes to people of color and Black Americans in particular. And there's no depth. There's nothing truly being taught that makes not only African Americans feel good about being an American, but also how do the rest of America feel good about African Americans? You know, like he brought up about the stereotypes and the racism and you know the white positive narratives and the Black. Every time you see somebody Black, they're either shooting somebody, they're doing this. You know, we are a minority in this country, but yet we're the most ones in jail. We're the most ones you see on TV. Half the time when somebody somebody white does something wrong, you know what I mean? Like the young lady just got killed. You know what I mean? Come on, how you gonna let the guy get away? You know what I mean? You had him right in his hands. It's those type of things that are daily. I was at a school board meeting recently about critical race theory, and I watched some of these parents literally get up, and with the venom in their voice and their mannerisms, it was just overwhelming for me, especially being older than most of them and having lived through this same type of nonsense. But they were so adamant on fighting about critical race theory, which number one isn't even being taught in the schools. It's not being taught in the schools, but they changed the narrative for their own personal reasons in terms of pushing the fact that they don't want true history being taught. You know, love Dr. King, you know what I mean? Love Rosa Parks, love all the rest. But there's so many more that have been a part of the building of this country that most kids don't even realize. And nowadays, because of the income gap, now too many young white kids and others are becoming so privileged that they don't even realize how they got there. You know, they don't realize like so much. And you know, when I start hearing about critical race theory and things like that, you know, it's nice to hear these young guys' perspective. But, you know, the other part is you have to also get out of the bubble of the main line, and you'll find out that this is all over the place. You know, this is something that is becoming a cancer to this country. And unless we all start doing what we're doing now, speaking out and doing more, this country is not going to be here much longer in terms of true democracy, even though we know what true democracy is. So, but I did want to chime in. Critical race theory is about to tear this country apart. And people are voting right now with misinformation, misguided information, and they're not voting on any other platform except we can't let these people have their way. And all we want to do is what we did back in the day. We want the same thing everybody else wants. We want to live happily. We want to have success. We want to have our homes. We want to have our families. We want to have our education. And right now,
and you guys get to pay the price.
Yes. Yeah. It's a fight.
Yeah. Roxanne.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Kevin.
Hey, Rox.
I agree. And the gentleman, that young gentleman that spoke, you are outstanding. You really are. It takes a lot of courage to stand up, particularly it's not just with young people you're talking to, but your elders. And you've done a phenomenal job. I just have to give you that. The other thing that I like to say, if it's all right, this critical race theory is taught on the university level in the law school. It has nothing to do with teaching it in the curriculum of the regular from elementary up to high school. It was a monkey wrench placed in there to cause all this confusion so that the real issues would not be dealt with. And I just like the fact that you young men said the conversations are so important. They're very important, not only for the African American students or Black students, but also for students who are from different countries as well as from the United States. Because the more that you find the truth and you hear the truth, you begin to look at your elders kind of funny. Like, what have you allowed to happen? And it is a mess. So when you do some things like I'm working with Power Mainline, and our big thing right now is to put the African American studies within the Lower Merion school system in their curriculum so that it's not something that's just, oh, we'll just give this as an elective type thing. No, it must be taught from elementary to high school so that all children and all young people have a chance to see it from maybe from a truer perspective. And then you begin to deal with it differently. And that's so important that we get that within the school systems. The other thing is that you're talking about conversations. The conversations are so important. And then there's the other part called political, which Kevin spoke about, which is this going to stay a democracy? So with all the election and everything that's happened, people are now getting fearful that it won't be that. So it is important that we are aware, and I think one of you young men spoke about understanding even the Constitution, what it says, and we need to be more aware of it. Not only us, but I'm also looking at the white churches and the Black churches and churches from different religious sects, that we can't get so caught up in what we used to do. Sometimes I get so tired of hearing people say, and Pastor so-and-so and First Lady so-and-so. And in the meantime, people are suffering and truly suffering. And like these young men, have said, it's been difficult. I came up in the 50s and 60s, and I remember being called an Oreo cookie. I know what you're talking about. And it's a crying shame that what I knew, and I have grandchildren who are in their 20s, you're still going through it. It's the same thing. So it's a matter of you young people standing up and standing strong. They did it during King's time, but they were taught a certain thing, which was not to communicate, but to be silent and to stand for something. And that didn't work real well because then the Black Panthers came. And then they were being treated terribly because of the fact that they spoke real loud about what they wanted and were made to feel different because of the fact that they said, we're not going to allow you to kill us or to murder us. But they did so many fantastic things. But it's a matter of really understanding what people have gone through. It really can be a very exciting time because you have the opportunity to make a tremendous difference in how things have been happening. We've been taught to be quiet. Slavery has done this to us. So I look at you and say, bravo to you. Yes. This is very exciting. Don't you dare give up what you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job, and it's called hope and faith, and you have it. Keep it up, and please, please, please don't give up the ship.
Yes. Thank you. I just want to add something. in previous, before saying that, if you're not receiving directly the invitations from Uncomfortable Conversations and you would like to be added to the invitation list, please make sure you put your email in the chat box and we make sure you're added. But what I wanted to say was actually this question of CRT, critical race theory, came up maybe in a couple of meetings, and our team organizing these, we had a little bit of consultation. We're open to actually dedicating one of the future meetings to this, somebody who's expert on the subject, maybe had taught the subject. If you could suggest to us, maybe we'll make contact, we will invite them. But it is a topic that I think it would be educational for all of us, whether we've been exposed to it before or not. It's worth dedicating one of these uncomfortable conversation meetings to it. So if you know people that you can suggest, by all means, the team will consider it.
I wanted to say something. The young men talked about code switching and being called Oreo, or you're not black, you white because you sound white. That has been going on for such a long time. And all three of these young men could be my grandsons. So back in 2016, when I purchased my first home, which is the one that I'm living in, I needed some advice, and Bevis Tabangar gave me the name of someone who had helped him with his real estate purchase. So most of the work, well, actually all of the work that was done to get the home was done over the telephone. And when I showed up for settlement, that was the first time I had seen the people that I had been speaking to over the telephone. And when I was signing the papers, there was one paper in particular that I remember, and it said, white, single, female, which was supposed to be me. And I said, oh, they think I'm white. I said, oh, that's good. Maybe that's why I got such a good deal, because they didn't know what I looked like. They only went with what I sounded like, which really fooled them, because you can't really know for sure who a person is just by hearing their voice over the telephone. And I had been subjected to some of the things that they showed in their videos, like calling because I had seen an apartment that was for rent. And then when I would go in to get the apartment, the person at the front desk would look up, and you can't really hide your feelings that well, especially in your eyes. And I would see a change, and she would say, oh, I'm so sorry, that apartment has been rented. And these things went on then, they continue to go on now. And I am so happy that these young people are speaking up and speaking out and understanding that they're important. They are as important as anyone else on this planet. And they're behaving that way. They speak well, they're learning, and they're good people. And I'm so happy that they spoke tonight. And thanks to all three of them.
So on the topic of critical race theory, I think, I'm not sure which one of you hit it on the head when you talked about fear, and that a lot of the change, it may seem like the change is coming about, but it's because of fear. And when I heard on the news tonight that I think the governor of Virginia got elected because he mentioned critical race theory, when he was running. And he actually said, and he didn't realize what he was saying. Sure, he didn't realize what he was saying, or maybe it was code that he was talking to his constituents and said, we want to honor our fathers of the past. We don't want to put them down. So it just told me that there's a fear that they don't want to accept this critical race theory because they're afraid that it will give a different image. We're not asking them not to honor, we're asking them to honor us and to honor our past and to honor what has happened to us. And that doesn't mean that we have to dishonor you. And I think that's a lot of the resistance is that fear that I have to give up something, that something's going to be taken from me. If we agree to this critical race theory being taught in school, then something's going to be taken away from our past, from our history, from who we are. And I think just getting people beyond that to understand it's not an either or. I don't have to dishonor your people to honor my people. And that's what we're asking you to honor our past, to honor what truly happened in our past. And that fear is what's stopping it. You know, they voted for him because they were afraid. And I think we have to get that message across so that people don't fear the change. That it's okay. You don't have to fear this change. We don't want to take anything from you. We just want to have that honor so that our kids can grow up looking at themselves in a different light, and they will behave in a different light, and society will be different, and we all will understand that we're all in this together. So I think maybe that might be something that we can think about. How do we change that view of fear? How do we change people viewing the change as something to be fearful of?
Kevin, what you got?
I just want to add. Mute. You mute. Sorry, guys. Mute yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to add. I want to just tell you guys, three of you are so amazing, amazing, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. And the deep insight that you have, it's amazing and gives me hope, at least, when I look at you and listen to you. So thank you for that.
Kevin, I see your hand.
Yeah, on behalf of my 3 young brothers here, 2 of them have school in the morning. So if there's any questions for them, you know, they really need to get to bed. In fact, even Joni, even though he's a college student now. But yeah, if there's any questions for them, please feel free to ask quickly, and then I'm going to, you know, make a motion to allow them to get to bed or studying or whatever they need to do. But I do want to thank them once again for their time. So if there's any questions for any of these 3, otherwise you guys can all say goodbye.
I just want to thank them again. And I want to thank you too, Kevin. I think you chose 3 excellent people to speak to us about this generation that is coming up today, because this is the world that they will inherit, not the world that I lived in or the one that you lived in, but this is their world. And I have every hope that they will change it. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. A lot of good food for thought.
Yeah, speaking of food, gotta eat.
Reminded you of something, right?
Bye, posse.
Bye.
All right, thank you for having us.
Something.
Good night. Thanks again.
All right, peace,
Everybody.
After a while, crocodile.
I'll be
See you
like
later,
a banana
alligator.
split.
Don't be like a banana split.
I'll be like a chip and dip.
Yeah, all right.
Good seeing you, Mary.
I'll see you guys.
See you, Vanessa and Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Overdone?
I think.
Okay.
It's looking like we are. Yeah.
All right. Well, good
I
night.
guess that's
Thank
my
you for
signal to
everyone.
stop recording, isn't it?